Welcome to another human-read audiobook by the United Marxist Pact Discord server, linked below in the description. In this series, we continue our investigation into the initial construction, the organizational structure, and the principles and tactics of the form of worker organization capable of seizing political power and establishing the revolutionary proletarian dictatorship and communality, which can in turn produce a communism of production due to shared class interests of the workers of the entire world. Our goal is to compile, analyze, and elaborate on what all these texts have to say about this, and at the end have a strong understanding of the exact scientific process of it, particularly in general terms. At the end of our readings as a whole, we will try to put it all together and present it as a coherent whole in an educational video with associated notations. Today's reading will be Lenin's Our Immediate Tasks from 1899. We have a pre-written textual analysis on the terms of the aforementioned topics, which is also posted in the pinned comment if you prefer to read it in text, or follow the link in the description to a read-only version of my Google Docs notes. This will summarize the contents of the text, but is no replacement for the actual reading itself, for the sake of understanding the context. In addition, in the reading I supply my own commentary, critiques, additions, etc., which may be helpful for understanding some particularities. So, in terms of the analysis, our immediate task is to produce a form of organization which can reckon with the contradiction that the power of the party is local, but we need complete unity as to make the best decisions. Class struggle can only really start when there is a center which understands the true character of class conflict and is able to unite all the various individual immediate struggles into one against the bourgeois class and the government. To do this, the party must be able to organize the workers via propaganda and agitation to turn all spontaneous struggle into a struggle of the whole working class via a political party. This party must universalize its action, program, tactics, and organization across all worker organizations, transcending local and chance peculiarities for focus on the whole. The produced program must not hang in the air, but rather meet the spontaneous movement of the masses, connecting them to socialist convictions, especially in the most advanced sections. To carry out such a program, it needs a form of organization of the movement that is adapted to national objective and subjective conditions. The connection of the masses should be turned into a science, that is to say, our propaganda and support for the masses should be at the level of science. Through such connection to the major struggles of the working class in the United Front, the Revolutionary Party can be made indestructible so long as we properly learn revolutionary techniques and secret organization methods specific to our national conditions while also remaining independent. The party must be able to reckon with that contradiction, the need for a center capable of organizing and giving advanced professional guidance to all local movements, while the local spontaneous activity of organization is the basis for all party activity. These local organizations cannot be amateur, as that spells defeat, but rather it should be under the direction of the class struggle of the proletariat, that is, a center, a vanguard, which understands the general character of the struggle, etc. At the same time, though, despite being under the direction of the vanguard cannot act as blankets as a conspiratorial organization, or direct adventurous conspiracies or calls to action. The ability of the party to draw strength from spontaneous movements it cannot anticipate and remain local, but not have its localities remain amateurish, is the goal. The method for achieving this goal is the central organ. This organ can only be achieved by organized activity of the party as a whole. It cannot be external to the party, and it must appear regularly, be closely connected with all local groups, while being able to answer all questions of policy, give direction to the various manifestations of the struggle, discipline revolutionary forces, and develop revolutionary technique, be able to act as a collective tool to elaborate on forms and rules of the conduct of affairs, determine party members' responsibility to the entire party. To do this, all literary, organizational ability, and material resources need to be concentrated within this organ, while activities outside the center, local agitation, demonstrations, boycotts, persecution of spies, protest strikes, campaigns against individuals in bourgeois government, etc., should not suffer as they are the party's activity basis, whereby through the center it accrues common experience, traditions, and continuity. The organ aids in the extension, consolidation, and systematization of local struggles. The central organ is a pivot on which learning, propaganda, and organization rests. And to be clear, this Lenin does specify that this doesn't necessarily apply in Western Europe, wherein less secrecy is necessary and there's more avenues for organization. I left it out, but I shouldn't have. I'll add it later. Now, I will begin the full audiobook reading. I hope that you enjoy the session and will attend next time as well. Okay, this is the United Marxist Pact. We are continuing our reading into the investigation of worker organization construction, structural organization, principles, and tactics. We're going back in time a little bit today, and we are reading Lenin's articles for Rабочая Gazeta, our immediate task. The Russian working class movement is today going through a period of transition. The splendid beginning achieved by the Social Democratic workers' organizations in Western area, St. Petersburg, Moscow, Kiev, and other cities was consummated by the formation of the Russian Social Democratic Labor Party, spring of 1898. Russian social democracy seemed to have exhausted for the time being all its strength in making this tremendous step forward and has gone back to the former isolated functioning of separate local organizations. The party has not ceased to exist. It has only withdrawn into itself in order to gather strength and put the unification of all Russian social democrats on sound footing. To effect this unification, to evolve a suitable form for it, and to get rid completely of narrow local isolation. Such is the immediate and most urgent task of the Russian Social Democrats. Okay. We're going to add this bit. There we go. All right, so the immediate task is to reorganize so that the party can break out of local isolation. It must unify all communists, and its structure must support that. Back to the text. We are all agreed that our task is the organization of the proletarian class struggle. But what is this class struggle? When the workers of a single factory or single branch of industry engage in struggle against their employer or employees, is this class struggle? No, this is only a weak embryo of it. The struggle of the workers becomes a class struggle only when all the foremost representatives of the entire working class of the whole country are conscious of themselves as a single working class and launch a struggle that is directed not against individual employers, against the entire class of capitalists, against the government that supports that class. Only when the individual worker realizes that he is a member of the entire working class, only when he recognizes the fact that his petty day-to-day struggle against individual employers and individual government officials is a struggle against the entire bourgeois, entire government, does his struggle become a class struggle. Quote, every class struggle is a political struggle. Footnote, Marx and Engels, the Manifesto of the Communist Party, pages 42 to 43. These famous words of Marx are not to be understood to mean that any struggle of workers against employers must always be a political struggle. They must be understood to mean that the struggle of the workers against the capitalists inevitably becomes a political struggle, insofar as it becomes a class struggle. It is the task of the Social Democrats, by organizing the workers, by conducting propaganda agitation among them, to turn their spontaneous struggle against their oppressors into the struggle of the whole class, to the struggle of a definite political party for definite political and socialist ideals. This is something that cannot be achieved by local activity alone. I'll take this entire thing. As usual, Lenin does not miss with his stuff. There's not a long break of useless crap and fluff that we are so used to. Right, So, class struggle is when the vanguard understands that the working class is in conflict with the whole of the bourgeoisie on a political level. Or can and individual workers must understand that their immediate conflicts are unified against the bourgeois class and state/government. The task of the party is to organize the workers via propaganda and agitation to turn all spontaneous immediate struggle into a struggle of the whole class via a political party. Back to the text. Local social democratic activity has attained a fairly high level in our country. The seeds of social democratic ideas have been broadcast throughout Russia. Workers' leaflets, the earliest form of social democratic literature, are known to all Russian workers from St. Petersburg to Krasnoyarsk, from the Caucasus to Urals. All that is now lacking is the unification of all this local work into the work of a single party. Our chief drawback, to the overcoming of which we must devote all our energy, is the narrow, quote, amateurist chapter of local work. Because of this amateurist character, many manifestations of the working class movement in Russia remain purely local events and lose a great deal of their significance as examples for the whole of Russian social democracy, as a stage of the whole Russian working class movement. Because of this amateurness, the consciousness of the community of interest throughout Russia is insufficiently inculcated in the workers. They do not link up their struggle sufficiently with the ideas of Russian socialism and Russian democracy. Because of this amateurness, the comrades' varying views on theoretical and practical problems are not openly discussed in a central newspaper. They do not serve the purpose of elaborating a common program and devising common tactics of the party. They are lost in narrow circle life, or they lead to inordinate exaggeration of local and chance peculiarities. Enough of our amateurs. We have attained sufficient maturity to go over to common action, the elaboration of a common party program, the joint discussion of our party tactics and organization. Okay, I'll add this. All right, so the party must establish the basis for common action, program, joint party tactics, and organization. Local and chance peculiarities must be transcended for focus on the whole. Continuing. Russian social democracy has done a great deal in criticizing old revolutionary and socialist theories. It has not limited itself to criticism and theorizing alone. It has shown that its program is not hanging in the air, but is meeting the extensive, spontaneous movement among the people, that is, among the factory proletariat. It now has to make the following very difficult but very important step: to elaborate an organization of the movement adapted to our conditions. Social democracy is not confined to simple service to the working class movement. It represents, quote, the combination of socialism and the working class movement, end quote. To use Karl Kautsky's definition, which repeats the basic ideas of the Communist Manifesto. The task of social democracy is to bring definite socialist ideals to the spontaneous working class movement, to connect this movement with the socialist convictions that should attain the level of contemporary science, to connect it with regular political struggle for democracy as a means of achieving socialism. In a word, to fuse the spontaneous movement into one indestructible whole with the activity of the Revolutionary Party. The history of socialism and democracy in Western Europe, the history of the Russian Revolutionary Movement, the experience of our working class movement, such is the material we must master to elaborate a purposeful organization and purposeful tactics for our party. Quote, the analysis of this material must, however, be done independently. Why is there space here? Since there are no ready-made models to be found anywhere. On the one hand, the Russian working class movement exists under conditions that are quite different from those of Western Europe. It would be most dangerous to have any illusions on this score. On the other hand, Russian social democracy differs very substantially from former revolutionary parties in Russia, so that the necessity of learning revolutionary technique and secret organization from old Russian masters. We do not in the least hesitate to admit this necessity, does not in any way relieve us of the duty of assessing them critically, elaborating our own organization independently. Actually, this entire section is quite important, so we will be putting this in. Again, Lenin doesn't have a lot of fluff, which is something that is not, we're not used to that. Anyway, so the program must not hang in the air, but rather meet the spontaneous movement of the masses, especially the most advanced sections. Program an or needs an organization of the movement that is adapted to the national objective and subjective conditions. Or must connect the spontaneous movement to socialist convictions. This connection should be a science. That is to say, our propaganda should be at the level of science. Through connection to major struggles of the working class, the Revolutionary Party can be made indestructible, that is, through the United Front. We must learn revolutionary techniques and secret organization special for our national conditions. Our organization must remain independent. Back to the text. In the presentation of such a task, there are two main questions that come to the fore with particular insistence. 1. How is the need for complete liberty of local social democratic activity to be combined with the need for establishing a single, and consequently a centralist, party? Social democracy draws its strength from the spontaneous working class movement that manifests itself differently and at different times in the various industrial centers. The activity of the local social democratic organization is the basis of all party activity. If, however, this is to be the activity of isolated quote unquote amateurs, then it cannot, strictly speaking, be called social democratic, since it will not be an organization leadership of the class struggle of the proletariat. 2. How can we combine the striving of social democracy to become a revolutionary party that makes the struggle for political liberty its chief purpose with a determined refusal of social democracy to organize political conspiracies? It's in fact refusal to, quote, call the workers to barricades, end quote, as correctly noted by P.B. Axelrod. Or, in general, to impose on the workers this or that, quote, plan for attack on the government, which has been thought up by a company of revolutionaries. Okay, we're gonna take this. And all right, so the party must be centralized while also able to draw its strength from spontaneous movements it cannot anticipate. The activity of local organizations is the basis of all party activity. Such local organizations cannot be amateur and must be under the direction of the class struggle of the proletariat, ergo the vanguard. The party should not act as blankets and should not go on adventuristic conspiracy or calls to action. Continuing. Russian social democracy has every right to believe that it has provided the theoretical solution to these questions. To dwell on this would mean to repeat what has been said in the article, Our Program. I guess I need to bring that up. Is that? No, it's not. I wish this had a link. Our program. Here we go. We'll come back to this. I'm going to add this. That's going to happen. Anyway, it is now a matter of the practical solution to these questions. This is not a solution that can be made by a single person or a single group. It can be provided only by the organized activity of social democracy as a whole. We believe that the most urgent task of the moment consists in undertaking the solution of these questions, for which purpose we must have our immediate aim the founding of a party organ that will appear regularly and be closely connected with all the local groups. We believe that all the activity of the Social Democrats should be directed to this end throughout the whole of the forthcoming period. Without such an organ, local work will remain narrowly amateurish. The formation of the party, if the correct representation of that party in its turn newspaper is not organized, will to a considerable extent remain bare words. An economic struggle that is not united by a central organ cannot become the class struggle of the entire Russian proletariat. It is impossible to conduct a political struggle if the party as a whole fails to make statements on all questions of policy and to give direction to the various manifestations of the struggle. The organization and disciplining of the revolutionary forces and the development of revolutionary technique are impossible without the discussion of all these questions in a central organ, without the collective elaboration of certain forms and rules for the conduct of affairs, without the embellishment, through the central organ, of every party's members' responsibility to the entire party. Yeah, exactly. uh, yeah, exactly. Exactly. This is everything I've been saying. Thank you, Lenin. Thank you for not being off your fucking gourd. Okay. All right. So the ability of the party to draw strength from spontaneous movements that cannot anticipate, remain local, but have its localities not be amateurs and be centralized under a central organ is the goal. Can only be achieved by organized activity of the party as a whole. He's an organ that appears regularly, is connected closely with all local groups. This organ must be able to answer all questions of policy, give direction to the various manifestations of the struggle, discipline revolutionary forces, develop revolutionary technique, be able to act as a collective tool to elaborate on forms and rules for the conduct of affairs, and to turn party members' responsibilities to the entire party. Back to the text. In speaking on the necessity to concentrate all party forces, all literary forces, all organizational abilities, all material resources, etc., the foundation and correct conduct of the organ of the whole party, we do not for a moment think of pushing other forms of activity into the background. For example, local agitation, demonstrations, boycott, persecution of spies, the bitter campaigns against individual representatives of the bourgeoisie and the government, protest strikes, etc., etc. On the contrary, we are convinced that all these forms of activity constitute the basis of the party's activities. But without their unification through an organ of the whole party, these forms of revolutionary struggle lose 9/10 of their significance. They do not lead to the creation of common party experience, to the creation of party traditions and continuity. Party organ, far from competing with such activity, will exercise tremendous influence on its extension, consolidation, and systematization. I'll add this, but we're not going to summarize it for now. The necessity to concentrate all forces on establishing a regularly appearing and regularly delivered organ arises out of the peculiar situation of Russian social democracy as compared with that of social democracy in other European countries, with that of the old Russian revolutionary parties. Apart from newspapers, the workers of Germany, France, etc., have numerous other means for the public manifestation of their activity, for organizing the movement, parliamentary activity, election agitation, public meetings, participation in local public bodies, rural and urban, the open conduct of trade unions, professional guild, etc., etc. In place of all that, yes, all of that, we must be served until we have won political liberty by a revolutionary newspaper, without which no broad organization of the entire working class movement is possible. We do not believe in conspiracies. We renounce individual revolutionary ventures to destroy the government. The words of Liebknecht, veteran of the German social democracy, serve as the watchword of our activities. Learn, propagandize, organize it. And the pivot of this activity can and must only be the organ of the party. But is a regular and more or less stable establishment of such an organ possible? And under what circumstances is it possible? We shall deal with this matter next time. And an urgent question is the next text. And I guess we're going to add both of these, actually. Okay, we got some new things to add. It's so freaking nice. I finally have some good fucking food. Um, we're going to summarize this real quick. Actually, I just realized that we do need to add this because this is pertinent for our ends of things too, because we have other options too now as well. What we should do in this case is up in the air. But right. Anyway. All right. So all party forces should be concentrated literary, organizational abilities, material resources. All activities outside the center should not suffer, as they are the basis for the party's activity. For example, local agitation, demonstrations, boycotts, persecution of spies, protest strikes, campaigns against individuals and bourgeois government, etc. These struggles need to lead to the creation of common party experience, traditions, and continuity. The party organ should aid in the the extension, consolidation, and systematization of such local struggles. The necessity. Okay. And, all right. So, in other conditions, not all forces need to be centralized in such a manner, as there are more variety of methods of struggle available elsewhere. Conspiracy and adventurism are bad. We need to learn, propagandize, and organize. Central organ is the pivot on which these are based. And that is the text. Short and sweet. Thank you, Lenin. And that is the end of our session today. Thank you, everybody who joined. Have a wonderful day.